Ladies and gentlemen, I'm kind of bored, so we're going to talk about two of my favorite things. Video games and behaviorism. We're going to combine those two things to give you a little precipice in gaming history and take a step back into the past and how video games used to be different. How they used to be very different. And I think my argument is that in the past, video games themselves were their own reinforcement, and in layman's terms, they were art in and of themselves. You played the product for the product. Of course, they had their addictive qualities. Companies wanted you to play them. They wanted you to buy them. But the strategies they used stepped into manipulation in the future. Looking at the modern era of DLC content, microtransactions, and those kind of purchases. But my friends, I tell you, that gaming in the past was different. And there's a scientific reason for it. And I believe I can somewhat, I hope, explain it to you. So, join me, my friends, as we learn how video games went from individual pieces of media, art, entertainment, to digital cigarettes meant to squeeze every little bit of, you can tell I don't know how to do this, every little bit of money out of you. Don't smoke, kids. It's bad for you. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Here I am simply wanting to explore game world and explain why Skinnerian principles in this game world are completely different in terms of simply creating a fun environment and an enjoyable environment to an outright addicting and manipulative environment. So we're talking about Skinnerian principles. That means I believe the game world is a Skinner box. A Skinner box is an experimental design in which generally animals like rats or pigeons were placed in conditions in which behavior was experimentally manipulated. Okay, so when we talk about behavior, we're talking about specific actions of a living organism. So of course, in the game world, the behavior is really representative of what I'm doing. So for me, I'm moving forward, I'm pressing a button. I'm moving backwards, I'm pressing the back button. I'm jumping, I'm pressing spacebar. I'm attacking, I'm clicking the mouse. Those are the living organism behaviors, but of course they're represented by attacking, they're represented by movement in the game, but of course they are just representative of the real topography of me moving forwards and backwards, left and right, by clicking buttons on a keyboard. Right. Okay, so those are what are targeted. Behaviors of a living organism. For pigeons, of course, it might be hitting a lever. For rats, the same thing. It might be what particular stimuli. Oh yes, we're going to talk about stimuli. Now, while I am hitting buttons, I'm engaging in a virtual Skinner box. The stimuli, well, yes, is the computer screen in front of me. It's the monitor. It's, the items in front of me. But really what I'm engaging with is the virtual world. And that is the walls here, the characters, the NPCs, of course, this world. Now, behavior analysis, the design choices are how do you manipulate the stimuli, the antecedent, what comes before behavior, what comes after behavior, to change how the player behaves. So of course, we have antecedent conditions, we have consequent conditions. Consequences are known as reinforcement and punishment. So we're going to look at this interaction here. So of course, this is a video game, so me being shot at is not incredibly aversive because it doesn't risk my life or my safety. I recognize that, and through social historical conditioning, know that, right? But it is aversive in that there are consequences in the game world. I may have to restart. I may have to go back to checkpoint. Right? But sometimes you can use aversives to keep a player engaged, but really you want to use reinforcement. So how is the game itself reinforcing me? Well, it's my interactions with the environment. I believe even those, I'm shooting the wall, I see a bullet hole, that's reinforcement. I'm engaging with the world, and it's responding. So, oh, I'm being shot at.
You'd be sitting in a design review and somebody'd say, that's not realistic. And you're like, okay, what does that have to, like, explain to me why that's interesting, because in the real world, I have to write up lists of stuff I have to go to the grocery store to buy. And I have never thought to myself that realism is fun. I go play games to have fun. And so we had to come up with some notion of what fun was. We knew it was an ad hoc definition, and it was the degrees to which the game recognizes and responded to the player's choices and actions, right? You know, in behavioral science, you would say we're explicitly talking about what were reinforcers and what the reinforcement schedules were, right? At that point in time, that was a useful way of making design decisions. The point I would make is, if I go up to a wall and shoot it, to me, it feels like the wall is ignoring me. I'm getting a narcissistic injury when the world is ignoring me. So does this, like, to me, I was trying to convey to the user a sense of, yes, you were making choices, yes, you were progressing, which meant the game had to acknowledge that back to you. If you shoot at a wall, there have to be decals. If you kill a bunch of Marines, the Marines have to run away from you, right? You have to have this sense of the game acknowledging and responding to the choices and actions and progressions that you've made. Otherwise, it loses any sort of impact.
So, my friend, let's talk about schedules of reinforcement. Okay, schedules of reinforcement. Why are the schedules so important? Well, my friend, they determine the rate of responding on average of organisms, including humans, to different consequences. Okay, so particularly reinforcing consequences. What do I mean by that? Well, there's 4 schedules. There's a fixed ratio. If I find that the ball coming back to me so that I can catch it is reinforcing, then me throwing the ball gives me a fixed ratio of 1, right? Every throw is reinforced because I get to catch the ball. Fixed ratio. Fixed interval. That was a little more difficult to explain. But let's say that I was continuously engaging in throwing the ball for a period of time. After every interval, fixed interval meaning time, if after every minute, I don't know, something happened. Something happened with the ball, or someone gave me a nice chocolate bar every minute that I threw the ball. That would be a fixed interval. That's really hard to explain. Yeah, if you were training a dog, for example, and you were wanting him to sit for an extended period of time, if you fixed your interval, if you fixed the time schedule of reinforcement to 1 minute, if he sat for 1 minute, you would get rewarded for the treat. Okay, that's fixed interval. Now, let's get to the spicy ones. Variable interval means that time, each reward in time is different. If I continuously sat here and threw a ball to catch it, and I was given a candy bar in 3 minutes, then the next time in 5, then the next time in 1, then the next time in 10 minutes, in a random sequence, that's variable. Variable time schedule reinforcement. Okay? This one's important for one particular reason. And so is the other one. Variable ratio. You engage in a particular behavior, such as throwing the ball, and then every 3 throws, 1, 2, 3, or not every 3, if one time it's 3, I get a special treat, and then the next time it's 5, the next time it's 9, the next time it's 11, randomly. People tend to find in real scenarios that the behavior skyrockets in rate. Skyrockets, I mean. Truly. So where does this occur? slot machines, gambling, and in the case of video games, we're really talking about what just looks just like gambling. Supply crates, random drops, sometimes there's a financial incentive. But the variable schedules are the most, they have the potential to bring about addiction the most in an organism.
Oh my God!
The pigeon learned that pecking the disc produced a reward. Then the behavior of pecking could be studied in relation to how often that reward was offered, or in Skinner's terms, what was the schedule of reinforcement.
The main thing is what we call schedules of reinforcement. Reinforcement is what the layman calls reward, and you can schedule it so that a reward occurs every now and then when a pigeon does something. We usually use a response with a pigeon pecking a little disc, a little spot in the wall, and you can reinforce with food, but you don't reinforce every time. Perhaps every 10th time, or perhaps only once every minute or something like that. There are a very large number of schedules, and they have their special effects. And there is a good example of how you can move from the pigeon to the human case, because one of the schedules which is very effective with rats or pigeons is what we call the variable ratio schedule, and that is at the heart of all gambling devices, and it has the same effect. The pigeon can become a pathological gambler just as a person can. Now, the fact that we found that out with pigeons and could prove it by removing and changing the schedule makes it easy for us to interpret the case with the human subject. We don't say that the human subject gambles to punish himself, as the Freudians might say, or gambles because he feels excited when he does so. Nothing of the sort. People gamble because of the schedule of the reinforcement that follows, and this is true of all gambling systems. They all have variable ratios built into them. So what we've learned from the pigeon, it made it possible to interpret this vast field very effectively.
So now you know about schedules of reinforcement. Great. What's the key difference between how video games use schedules of reinforcement now, in multiplayer titles and even in single-player titles, versus then, predominantly? It's the different schedules. It's fixed ratio, and variable ratio reinforcement. What did you just see there? I was looking through some of the weapons, and what did you find? That as you progressed through the game, you'll find that you earned weapons through fixed ratio reinforcement. You knew exactly what you had to do. I'm not using behavioral analytic terminology here, but I'm using more mentalisms. That's fine. That's for the behavior analysts out there. But for everyone else, you know what you have to do. You know if you do X, you get Y. Right? If you get so many headshot ribbons, you'll get your vector KID. Okay? If you also look through, your attachments are the same way. They're fixed ratio. Guns, in general at the time, I believe this to be true for Black Ops 2. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite certain. But I believe this to be true. That there was not paid DLC weapons with this FOMO scheduling. We'll get into that in a second. But camos themselves as well also are based on a fixed ratio system. Simple. Fixed ratio. Now they both maintain high rates of behavior, but there's, again, that key difference. And what's that key difference that we were talking about? Predictability and transparency. So the rule for reinforcement, after X responses, you get reinforcement. So you can learn and anticipate when you're going to get your reinforcement, when you're going to get a certain weapon. It also may build skill levels within the game. You get better at the game. You increase the frequency of certain behaviors that make you better at the game. Right? You could also do that with variable interval, of course, but variable interval tends to be selected for a different kind of behavior. And of course, one difference as well, the behavior being targeted. It used to be that it was predominantly fixed ratio to maintain high rates of behavior, but it wasn't extrinsic behavior. It was just the game that they were interested in. Your behaviors within the game, not external behaviors outside of the game. What is that external behavior outside of the game? Purchasing items, of course. But either way, hold that thought. Let's again compare fixed ratio and variable ratio. So not inherently coercive. Variable ratio, which relies on uncertainty in maintain responding. Fixed ratio schedules, they don't trick anyone. It's a contingency that is consistent. And fixed ratios are common everywhere. You get paid after work. You know, if you work 5 days a week, or maybe if you work for 2 weeks, you get your paycheck. That's a fixed ratio. Use punch cards to get discounts at shops. They're fair, they're reasonable. You know exactly what you have to do. But variable ratio also has a higher rate of responding. It's even more resistant to extinction. What is extinction? Extinction, my friends, is when you hold the reinforcement of a particular behavior and that behavior declines. So that's a key thing about variable ratio reinforcement. Very, very important key. Okay? Why? Well, you want to make sure that they don't stop. You want to keep people engaged in the game. You want to keep them engaged in the game. It's very important. Okay? So resistant to extinction means it's less likely they're going to stop playing the game. Cool, right? Well, it's about the ethical use of reinforcement systems. So I wanted to focus again. What I noticed about Black Ops is truly there was hardly any variable ratio reinforcement systems. You knew exactly what you had to do and how you would get access to that reinforcer. Now in modern titles, there's plenty of variable ratio reinforcement. Let's talk about them. So, what have we seen that's changed over the years? Of course, Gabe Newell there was explaining how they would use schedules of reinforcement to make a game more exciting. We saw a gameplay of Half-Life 1. So, what were they reinforcing? What were they trying to make fun? That's what reinforcement is. Something that's fun, it makes you want to continue engaging in the behavior of playing the game, okay? So reinforcement, they were using that to make the game fun because they had no other motivations. You spent your money on the game. There was no way that you could also spend more money on the game. There was no alternative motivations of publishers. Okay, so now we have microtransactions, of course. Microtransactions are, you engage in the behavior of spending money on a reinforcing item or thing within the game. Of course, this does require that you enjoy the game itself. You find the game reinforcing. Why? Because you're not going to spend items within a game, within an experience, within a world that you're not going to access again, right? So you do have to have that core gameplay experience be fun, be reinforcing, be exciting. So, what's the key difference here? He was talking about using schedules of reinforcement to have the world interact with you. You know, he's talking about shooting at a wall. That wall reacts to you. Shooting at an enemy. The enemy reacts to you. That's fixed ratios of reinforcement that you know that are that's happening. The in-game world is reinforcing. It's exciting. It's fun. You continue playing it. It's reinforcing of its own merit because you've spent your money on it. There is no other thing other than they want the thing itself to be exciting, fun, and reinforcing because you may, through your verbal behavior, tell other people to purchase the game and play it and have fun, right? So the key thing, the key importance here is this change in motivations of the publisher. What am I saying here? The motivations of the publisher have changed with reinforcement schedules because of the introduction of microtransactions. So they're not just targeting the behavior of playing the game and enjoying the game of its own merit, they're targeting the behavior of also purchasing microtransactions. So they're doing that with variable intervals of reinforcement. They are also changing the way reinforcement acts on the game. So before, right, let's talk about this. What have they changed before? We talked about fixed ratios of reinforcement. You get a kill and you get rewarded for that. Or before it used to be that cosmetic items were tied to the game itself. You know, you had to do a certain thing in order to get that cosmetic item. The demand, the actual demand, the difficulty of achieving a cosmetic item was higher. The reinforcement was harder to access. And it could be certain types of fixed ratio reinforcements, for example. It could be get 10 headshots within a certain match or get so many kills within a certain match thing. It could be difficult things that you had to accomplish, and it rewarded you based on that skill, based on the demand they placed upon you. That was the reinforcement, getting good at the game, getting good at what you were playing. So it was still embedded within the system, the game system itself, right? So, well, what we're now seeing is this movement away from skill-based, high-demand reinforcement to more low-demand reinforcers. We're seeing bots being implemented in multiplayer games. You start up a match and you're playing with a bunch of bots. And sometimes they hide that the bots are bots, right? So plenty of games have introduced bot lobbies. It's obvious. It's not something that's hidden. This is a clear thing that's being done. What do these bot lobbies do? Before, a fixed ratio of reinforcement would have been, to get a kill or to get so many kills and get kill streaks or get these things and get rewarded for that. Well, that fixed ratio may be 1, right? It's still maybe 1 for that access to reinforcement, but the demand of getting that fixed ratio reinforcement is lowered, and it keeps you playing longer. Using skill-based matchmaking to change the way and the oftenness that you win. They always want to ride on the precedence of a hard win, of a difficult journey, the systems themselves are becoming more hidden. It used to be you knew what you were getting into, you knew exactly how you were being reinforced, you knew exactly what you had to do. Now they're using systems in place to change the contingencies of reinforcement in such a way that they are hiding how you're being reinforced. And I'm going to display some examples of that on the screen. But they're changing the way you interact with the game, not just so that the game itself is reinforcing of its own merit, but so that you continue interacting with the game and purchasing microtransactions. It's using dopamine-based schedules of reinforcement to continue and to manipulate players into longer game time. So, as they're changing the relationship dynamic with reinforcers within the gameplay itself by using bots, so to decrease the effort that you have to access reinforcement, or they're using skill-based matchmaking, and hiding certain manipulatives, they're also changing the way that you're interacting with the store. So, again, variable ratio reinforcement, very important, because variable ratio is highly reinforcing. A person doesn't have to know this is going on. It's highly reinforcing, and such that it's also resistant to extinction as well. So what's happening? What's the variable ratio we're seeing here? Not all variable ratio has to look like a slot machine. It does not have to look like the random access of reward. It can be more subtle than that. So what is this randomization that you're seeing? The fear of missing out. Daily updates to the Fortnite store. So the store is set to a fixed interval of updates, right? So variable interval update ratio. So you know that the store can change. So what behavior are they targeting? Your interaction with the store. If you're checking in the store daily, you're probably a victim of this conditioning, right? If you're checking the store so often, each day, that you're highly aware of the changes in the store, they've got you. You are engaged in that variable ratio of reinforcement, and that variable ratio is the change of the store. And it also sets a motivating operation and establishes high reinforcement items for a limited time. And what is this variable ratio here? It's that if you do not purchase at this time, you don't know when how long you'll have to wait. It's variable, right? You don't know when you'll have access to that reinforcer again. You may have access to that reinforcer again in a week. It may be in a few days. It may be in a few months. It may be in a few years. So there, you don't know how long that item is going to be available. And you know that, right, it sets an establishing operation and it increases the likelihood that someone would purchase. It is the same system that the pigeons and the rats were introduced to in the Skinner box. It is the same system there that they're, and you don't have to be aware linguistically. You don't have to go, oh yes, I can see, I'm in control of this. No, you have a conditioned response set from variable ratio reinforcement. High reward, high reinforcing items that are variable introduced to you with limited time and such that you have to engage in the behavior then or you risk losing access to the reward. Okay, so this is highly addicting, highly resistant to extinction, and again, these are the reinforcement systems. It used to be that these rewards, cosmetic rewards, were embedded in the gameplay itself. Now, it's not reinforcing the gameplay, it's not reinforcing your skill, it's not reinforcing those things, it's reinforcing opening your wallet and pulling out your credit card. So, again, these are, and it's ethically questionable because, again, there's lots of kids who are playing these games. Who are also, again, in early development, dopaminergic activity and stuff, who are highly vulnerable to this kind of system. And just like supply drops, just like other things, it's really unfortunate. And this is the motivations that we're seeing because the gameplay is less important because it's the engagement with the store that makes the company more money. There's more motivation there. There's more reinforcement for the company themselves to make the store engaging, right? So. Hello there, welcome. You made it to the end of the video. It's 2:13 in the morning here, and I have ADHD, so this whole video had to be made in one run. So what does that mean? The audio quality, up and down. The editing, shoddy at best. You've probably seen some mistakes, but hopefully it gives you that old classic YouTube feel, right? Either way, I wanted to conclude this by just kind of giving you a premise of why I did this. So the point was to walk you through a little bit of the principles of behavior analysis, at least somewhat, at least the kind of foundations that we wanted to talk about in game design, like the schedules of reinforcement, right? And how those influence behavior. And particularly what I think businesses who make games have targeted over time. Before, I do believe that gaming was predominantly an art, designed as an art. Of course, it's in a capitalist system. It was meant to be consumed, and it was meant to be bought, and they meant to make money off of it. But the design philosophy was more akin to art. So I said earlier that video games are kind of like cigarettes now. Why would I say something like that? God, this is gross. Well, the reason I said that is simple. The design philosophy. The cigarette can provide benefits, right? Let's be real. The cigarette offers short-term benefits, relaxation. Other examples, it's reinforcing to smoke a cigarette. But the design principle is this is really manufactured to make people money. It's designed to be addictive. It's designed to increase and maintain profits for the companies that make it. The design philosophy of the cigarette is to make money. It is not art. Video games particularly the free-to-play model, you know, this use of variable ratio reinforcement, and this turn away from fixed ratio schedules to this more manipulative model, which really doesn't target your enjoyment within the game itself, your gaming itself, if we want to call it that, but getting out your wallet and paying. Because at the end of the day, that's what cigarettes become. At the end of the day, people generally are not finding as much enjoyment from the cigarette itself, but maintaining the behavior of making sure that whatever social things that's being reinforced through skins or these microtransactions, that it's the cigarette. At the end of the day, games are more like cigarettes now. Not all of them. What I mean. It's really the big multiplayer models, right? Have become more akin to cigarettes than art pieces themselves or enjoyment themselves, like sports, for example. Either way, that was my rambling and why I made this video. I don't do this, it's just a problem. Cigarette. With that being said, thank you. If you made it this far, thank you. I'm glad you watched. I have a big interest in behaviorism, behavior analysis, B.S. Skinner, and the likes, and the history there. I plan on doing more, just walking through video games themselves and looking at the reinforcement systems that are used. It's interesting, kind of fascinating, I think. With that being said, I guess peace out and goodbye. Au revoir.